Namo Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Bdtv English program. By the way, first of all, we would like to inform you that today marks the final episode of our weekend programs. Starting next week, we will no longer broadcast the Bdtv English and Chinese editions during the weekends. However, both programs will continue to air every Thursday evening. The Bdtv Chinese program will begin at 8 p.m., followed immediately by the Bdtv English program at 9 p.m. This new schedule that officially begins on 21st of August allows viewers to enjoy both programs back to back in a single evening, a rare and valuable opportunity to absorb the holy and sublime teachings of the Buddha. We kindly urge you to share this message widely and encourage others to tune in to the weekly Bdtv programs and to gain the greatest possible benefit from these sublime teachings of the Supreme Buddha. Today, what is on the program for you? We have a Buddhist sermon, a Buddhist song by the popular musical group of Malaysia, the Wayfarers, and a popular story of a Jataka tales. Now, we begin our program with a highly respected Buddhist monk, the Venerable Agachita of Malaysia. He has devoted many years for doing researches on Buddhism and strictly practicing Vipassana meditation. He propagates the noble teachings of the Buddha. The Venerable is going to talk on the topic of Watch Your Mind Now. Very interesting topic. Please welcome Venerable Agachita to enlighten us with the noble teachings of the Buddha, to the study and research of Buddhism, going deeply into a wide range of important topics.
Hi, Pate.
I must first of all express my gratitude to Sudama Buddhist Society for inviting me to participate in this Zoom event, because at first I thought that where I'm staying, in an Ulu place, I would not be able to connect to Zoom. But then with Brother Lee and Sharon's encouragement, we somehow managed to rig it up. And so I'm very happy that I'm able to reach out to everybody here who are participating in this event today. The title of today's talk is Watch Your Mind Now. I think it's a very interesting talk. It was suggested by the members of Sudama Buddhist Society itself, and it's really my cup of tea, because for the past 15 years or so, I have been trying to encourage people to practice mindfulness in daily life, and particularly to watch the mind rather than the objects. I think you all know that most meditation techniques available these days focus on watching the objects of the senses, watching your breath, watching the rising and falling, watching your movements, and so forth, mostly focusing on the objects of the senses. But I have been trying to shift the focus to watching the subject rather than the objects. The subject is the one that is experiencing all these things that is happening outside. Not only the five senses, but the mind itself. So I was very happy that they picked this topic, because it is very close to my heart, and I've been teaching this for the past 15 years or so. Why is it important for us to watch the mind, especially right now in such trying circumstances, in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic? Now we're just coming out of the MCO, so it's not that bad. But when most countries have enforced this restriction on people from going out, then we're all forced to stay together in our own family, in our own household. Although it's good to have family cohesion, it's good for the family to come together, it's a good time for parents to be with their children. Otherwise, they'll be very busy making a living and having little time with the children and members of the family. But there are also a downside to it. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the English saying, familiarity breeds contempt, right? And absence makes the heart grow fonder. So when you are confined to your small apartment or your little house, particularly if you live in an apartment, up in a high rise in a condo, you know, your space of movement is very restricted and you have to see the same people day in and day out and they get on your nerves, right? So that's one of those things that bother a lot of people when they are confined in these small places, restricted to this, such confined places. I saw a short clip from BBC which talks about one guy in Italy who was saying that if this restriction continues to go on, I'm locked in my little apartment. If I can't go outside, I'm going to go crazy soon. For people who are not used to meditation, who have not done any sort of meditation before, that is something not to look forward to, something which is difficult to cope with. But for people who have done retreats before, who are particularly good at meditating, they find that this is a wonderful opportunity for them to practice mindfulness in daily life, within the home, time for them to go on a perennial retreat, so to speak. But like everybody knows, after a very heavy schedule in your daily life, and then you plan for a long-awaited holiday, vacation, you're very excited and very happy when you set out on a vacation. After a few days, you begin to feel bored. So because the mind is so used to getting busy with lots of things, so you get bored after some time when the novelty wears out. In the same way, at first you may rejoice that you have this MCO, this restriction of movements, you're just confined to a place and it's time for you to do your own personal retreat. But after some time, people get bored. Yeah, it's just the nature of the mind. So the importance of watching your mind is for you not to get caught up in all these thoughts, these reactions that goes on automatically in most people. Not only are you confronted with these problems of relationship with your family, but there are also thoughts about concerns about the future. As you all know, there's going to be a global recession very soon, if not already happening now. And many airlines in the world are closing shop because no business, no travelers. So the economy is going to suffer a great deal, and some people might become unemployed, and unemployment is on the rise. So these are things that also bother people in these trying times. So if you allow your mind to get caught up in such thoughts without having any constructive answers to them, solutions to them, then you are causing unnecessary suffering to yourself. Another concern is fear of contagion, because the disease is so easily transmitted. And you have to exercise utmost mindfulness and perseverance and persistence in order to follow all those guidelines issued by the authorities with respect to social distancing, with respect to the sanitation of your hands, the things that you come into contact with. So it's very easy to forget about that and to accidentally touch something, and then that could actually bring about a contagion within your family. So all these things also require mindfulness. During the start of this COVID pandemic, when it first came to Malaysia, I also had a duration where I felt unwell. There was this persistent fever going on, but it was not high fever. When I read about all these guidelines, I tried to follow it for one day, but it was so tedious. You know, every doorknob that you close and open has to be sanitized. You have to wash your hands every time. And if you want to wash your hands, you have to use the sanitizer and that dries your skin. Oh, wow, it's so tedious. And luckily, I'm staying alone. And luckily, nobody around my area got infected. So we don't really have to follow these guidelines that strictly. However, if you're staying in some places like in KL, some hot areas, some red areas, red spots, and especially when you go to public places, then you have to be really very careful. And so that requires a lot of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not just about being in the present moment. Mindfulness is the quality of remembering, reminding yourself, yeah, not to unnecessarily touch doorknobs, to keep away from touching your face. Like in Singapore, they say that your face is sacred. Don't touch your face because that's an opportunity for the virus to come into contact with your mucous membrane somewhere with the mucus, and then it will flow into your lungs. Right, so these are the concerns that we have, concerns about relationships when we are confined, when we are restricted to a confined place, number one. Number two, also concerns about the economy of the future. If you're a student, also concerned about your studies, how about your exams and so forth. And thirdly, we also have a lot of concerns about this pandemic, contagion, and the impact it will have also on Buddhist centers, where people cannot go physically to your premises. And because Buddhist centers depend on donations when people come to their centers, now this is something like a vacuum. So where are you going to get your funds to continue to run your society, to pay a rent if you're renting a space somewhere for your Buddhist society's premises? So no doubt we have to do something. We have to learn to manage the mind, not to be overly concerned or get carried away and proliferate on some of these problems and issues which we cannot solve. So if you find that you cannot solve those issues, then leave them aside first and do something more useful. Okay, so now we know how important it is. So that's why we need to watch the mind. Yeah? We need to watch the mind so that we'll be able to sieve those important things, and then the unimportant things that we cannot solve, then we have to leave aside. Part of the title is also the importance, the efficacy, and how of watching the mind. So the importance of watching the mind, first of all, is that when you watch your mind, you understand your thoughts and emotions more. Rather than becoming a slave of your past conditioning, of reacting automatically, or spontaneously, irrationally, or impetuously to some trigger that somebody has pulled or some button that somebody has pushed. So when you understand your thoughts and emotions more, then you will be able to reprogram your mindset through direct personal experience. Now we'll talk more about this later. I'm just giving you the main points. And once you're able to do that, once you're able to understand your thoughts and emotions, and you're able to reprogram your mindset through direct personal experience, it's not something theoretical. It's something that you really experience yourself. You see the profundity of it. It's a sort of a realization. And then you become more accepting and forgiving of yourself and others. When you see yourself, when you watch your mind, you see how your thoughts and emotions come and go, how all your thoughts, your ideas are the products of numerous causes and conditions. Then you begin to sympathize and empathize with people. You know, we are all in the same boat. And then when you can do that, then it's easier to let go and therefore be more contented and happy. Okay, so that's how it becomes efficacious. When you watch your mind, you understand yourself, then you can also understand others. Yeah, so this is the importance and efficacy of watching the mind, but then how do you go about watching the mind? You see, it's easy to say, watch your mind, watch your mind. But most people, when they try to watch their mind, what happens is they get caught up in their own thoughts and emotions. So it's not so easy to watch the mind if you don't have a foundation in anchoring the mind elsewhere so that it doesn't get caught up in unnecessary thinking, imagination, proliferation, and so forth. Now, in order to understand how to do so, it's good for us to also understand, theoretically, some fundamentals about how the mind works. So I'm going to talk about what I usually call the 5-6-1 feature of the senses. Right? 5-6-1. Well, this one doesn't have 4 digits, so you can't, no umpat echo for you to go and buy afterwards. It's only 3 digits, 5-6-1. And the 5 here refers to the 5 senses. As you all know, our 5 senses can only take objects in the present moment. Not only that, each sense is very specific. The eye can only cognize or be aware of visual objects. The ears can only hear sounds. The nose can only smell smells. It cannot see, it cannot hear. The tongue can only taste tastes, and it cannot do any of the other functions of the other senses. And the body can only sense physical sensations. And the body cannot smell, cannot taste, cannot hear, cannot see. So they are very specific, and each of their specific object must also be in the present moment. The eyes can only see something if the eyes are open, the eyes are in good order, the eyes are open, there's light, and there's an object. If any of these conditions are not there, then the eye won't function, can't see anything. And it must be in the present moment. You see, right now you're watching the video, right? If the host decides to kick you out of the room, then you can't see anything, right? Because the conditions are not there. You saw something last night, perhaps you saw a video, YouTube video or documentary somewhere. But if you are not watching it right now, it's not on the screen right now, you won't be able to see it with your eyes. You ate something last night, some very delicious food. Yeah, but now if it's not in your mouth, your tongue also cannot taste the food. Right? So it's very obvious that all of the 5 senses can only take objects right here, right now. Number 6 here refers to the 6th sense, and that's the mind. The mind is different from the 5 senses. It's very special because it can take objects of the past, present, future, and beyond. Although your eyes cannot see the video you saw last night, although your tongue cannot taste the food that you ate earlier on this morning for breakfast, your mind can recall that experience that's past. The mind can also be aware of present objects, even without the senses. Now, with our senses in good order, with our 5 senses operating simultaneously, the mind actually doesn't really see objects in the present. The eye sees first, and then the mind tries to interpret what the eyes have seen. The eyes only see colors, and the mind will interpret what color it is. I'll give you one good example. A couple of years ago, I was having a retreat up in Mitraville in Kundasan, up in Sabah. It was pretty high, maybe 1,000 meters high. And at that time, early in the morning, we had this guided open awareness practice. I call it panoramic awareness because all the yogis were outside, sitting, facing the hills. And it was about dawn, between dawn to sunrise. So they were facing, they were all sitting or standing at the corridor, at the balcony, facing the very scenic landscape, panoramic view in front of them. So when we practice panoramic awareness, we just put the attention of the eye in space, defocus it, and just be aware of seeing as well as whatever is happening to the senses. So at that time, there were mists covering the mountaintops, covering the valleys below. That's a beautiful sight. And then the colors were changing because it's dawn, and it's changing from a little brightness in the sky to various shades of orange and yellow, being in the clouds, looking at all this scenic thing like a Shangri-La. It's supposed to be very beautiful, isn't it? So I asked the yogis, now look carefully, watch your mind. When you're admiring this panoramic beauty, is the beauty being appreciated by the eyes or by your mind? So I just left it to them, and later on during the interview, I asked them, so is the English saying correct? Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder? It's not. Beauty does not lie in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty lies in the mind of the beholder. Because what the eye sees are just colors. The eyes cannot differentiate between mists and hills and different shades of orange and yellow and white and blue. No. The beauty of all these things, the sense of beauty actually arises in the mind itself. And this sense of beauty also is probably conditioned by past experiences, by past ideas of how things should be. The mind is not actually aware of the present, not the real present. This is an immediate past. The eye sees all these various colors first, and then the mind will piece all these different acts of seeing together and make an idea out of it. Create the concept of beauty and evoke the sense of pleasure or well-being. So what sort of present objects does the mind really recognize? Now, if the five senses are all shut down and the mind can still see, hear, and smell, then that should be in the present. And when does this happen? I'm sure many of you have heard of out-of-the-body experiences, especially now. Millions of people have gone through that because of the advance in our technology. Now, people who die of heart disease or heart attack or are hurt seriously in an accident are taken to the hospital, to the emergency room, to the ICU, to the operating room, and then the emergency physicians will try to resuscitate their body, even though the heart has stopped beating, and in some cases, even though brain is no longer functioning. So this may happen for quite a while. Sometimes it's just a few minutes, sometimes it's a few hours, and in some bizarre cases, even a few days. I know of one very bizarre case. I think it's a Russian. He was put in the mortuary for a few days before he revived, and then he told the story of what happened during that time when he's supposed to be dead. Okay, so what happens when these people describe their out-of-body experience, so-called out-of-body? Because at that time, they are supposed to be dead. The senses are no longer functioning. All the instruments that are rigged to the body, to the brain, are all registered. It's all zero. But then when they come back after the experience, when they are resuscitated, they say that at that time, they were fully conscious of what's happening. Some people say that they were up on the ceiling, looking down and what the surgeons are trying to do, or frantically trying to revive the patient. And the patient can also describe in detail all the processes and the instruments that the surgeons, the emergency physicians were using. This baffled the emergency team because there's no scientific explanation for that. A layman would not be able to know those complicated procedures that were going on. And not only that, there was one particular case of one woman. One surgeon was trying to save this woman, and in the course of the operation, suddenly the ECG machine went beep, 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 beep. It was straight line, nothing left. No more heartbeat, no more breathing. And so the doctor, in exasperation, exclaimed, or rather cursed, "I lost you, you bitch." He said that. But then later, somehow, they managed to revive that lady. And when she came out of it, she told them what happened. And she told the surgeon, "I heard what you said." You see, so all these things are happening, even though the five senses are shut down. The mind can still perceive things happening in the present moment. And there are some people who have clairvoyance. It's a natural gift. They can know what's going to happen in the future. And of course, you don't see the future with your eyes. You see it with the mind's eye. An event that's going to happen somewhere, and they know about it. And when the time comes, then the event actually happens. So this is natural predisposition of some people. It's a natural gift. Or some people say it's a curse, because sometimes they know that something bad is going to happen to somebody, and yet they can't do anything about it, and they can't even tell that person. So some people say, I'd rather not have that gift because it's so difficult and so frustrating, and sometimes so sad. Okay, so that's past, present, and future. The mind, the sixth sense, is really very special. It's not limited to the present, but it can take objects of the past, present, future, and beyond what the five senses can comprehend. For example, the mind can experience Nibbana and other worlds and other dimensions. I remember one story of one artist who was an atheist, or rather, he was a non-believer. He doesn't believe in anything. And then he had this near-death experience. And after he went through that whole experience, he came back and became a pastor. He was an artist. So he described his experience when he was in this realm. He says the colors were just unimaginable. There's no way that you can imagine those colors. There's no way that you can reproduce those colors with our pigments and whatever paints that we have right now. And it's indescribable. Of course, because we can only describe things according to what our senses perceive. But that's beyond the five senses. Also, some people, when they go up there, they hear certain sounds and musics and vibrations. They also say it cannot be described. There's no way that the vocabulary of the five senses can describe something which they experience through the mind, not through the five senses. Now we go on to one. So one here refers to the object that the mind can take. We saw that the five senses can only take objects in the present and must be very specific to the sense, whereas the mind can take objects of the past, present, future, and beyond. But even though the mind can be so fantastic, so special, for normal people, the mind can only take one object at a time. I have a qualifier there for normal people because they are very highly attained Indian yogis who say that when they reach a certain stage, they can experience things simultaneously. And there are also accounts of people who witness this particular yogi appearing in different places at the same time. So that is super normal people. So we're talking about normal people who are not that great yogis. So normally the mind can only take one object at a time. And I'm sure many of you might protest and say, how can that be true? I can multitask. Right now, I'm not only hearing what you say, not only understanding what you say, but I'm also looking at you in the video. I'm also sensing my body. I'm smelling things. So it seems that everything is happening simultaneously. Correct. Everything is happening simultaneously, but the mind can only know one object at a time. The body, for example, you know the senses in the body, the receptors in the body, in the trillions. You can only experience very gross sensations that are predominant. While you're listening to me, you cannot experience what's happening in your stomach or in various parts of the internal organs. But the body knows, and the body has its own intelligence, and the body is operating by itself, making sure that things are going smoothly and all the organs are functioning smoothly. Yeah, it's doing so, but the mind doesn't know. The mind doesn't know a single thing. Neuroscientists have also proven that multitasking is actually, multitasking works, but the mind doesn't actually multitask. The mind works so fast that you think you are multitasking. So what they did was they wired the brains of their subjects and then they put them to some multitasking job. And then they monitor what's going on in their brain. And they found that when a person is doing different types of activities in that multitasking job, one part of the brain will be stimulated for each activity. But it happens so fast, you think that it's happening simultaneously. Now, I'm not saying that mind equals brain. Although most neuroscientists nowadays believe so. They believe that the mind is the brain. But I would say that there is a correlation with neural activity and mental activity. Not necessarily that the mind must be the brain, but there is a correlation between one and the other. And the mind is the precursor, followed by neural activity. Okay, so when we know this 561 feature of the senses, how can that help us to watch the mind? Well, for most people, the mind is all over the place, thinking of this and that. If you're a student or if you are an employee and you are supposed to focus on a particular task, and then you will know sometimes when you cannot focus because the mind is distracted by many things, many other concerns. Perhaps if we had an argument or a quarrel with somebody, a friend or a close one, you are not satisfied with that, you are dissatisfied, you have a lot of anger or the resentment, and you try to do a work, you try to study, you try to execute a particular task, you find that your mind keeps on running off, going back to that incident to replay all the unpleasant sensations, as though the mind is very sadistic. You know, it's unpleasant already, why you want to think about it? But it's the nature of the mind. The mind just loves to suffer. by thinking about all those unpleasant things. Okay, so you see that most of our sufferings, our mental sufferings, occurs in the mind. Granted, there are physical sufferings, of course, due to external factors like your diet, your environment, your lifestyle, stress, and all these sort of things, physical stress. That can also bring about suffering. That is on the physical level. Scientists have found out that even though our world now is so advanced technologically, so many conveniences and comforts in life. You have now artificial intelligence, robots can do everything for you. Things are so easy. You can just wash your dishes by pressing a button. You cook your food by just switching on the gas. It's so simple. And yet, one of the major diseases that are rising in the world right now is connected with the mind. The depression. Depression is overtaking heart disease and some of these other degenerative diseases. So a lot of suffering is happening in the mind. So it's about time then that we begin to watch the mind and manage all these things so that we don't become slaves of our past conditioning and suffer through our own proliferations. So by knowing this 5-6-1 principle, since the mind is a culprit, the mind is a culprit that is creating all these imaginings, all these concerns, all these fears, all these proliferations to make us suffer, then we need to do something so that it doesn't end up that way. Right, since the mind can only take one object at a time, what if we tie the mind to just the 5 senses? Now, since the 5 senses can only be aware or be conscious of objects in the present moment, if you tie the mind to be aware of the 5 senses, then the mind is as close to the present as it can be. It's not in the real present, but right immediately behind the real present, because the 5 senses are conscious of present objects. And if the mind is aware of the objects of the 5 senses, that means it's right behind the present. So when the mind is tied in that sort of situation, since the mind can only take one object at a time, then it doesn't have the time to go and think of other things, especially all those resentment, jealousy, anger, and so forth. No time, because it's busy with the so-called present, the immediate past. So that brings me to how to compose the mind. Now I have this formula which I created. It's called Ada Anchor. Some of you who have already attended my retreats before would know very well what I mean. I also do that. I also teach that during guided meditation in my Sutta study with meditation workshops. A stands for accept the fact that whatever happens is a product of causes and conditions. Whatever happens in the mind, and also whatever happens to the senses. These are products of causes and conditions, and even though you might not be able to understand or see experientially the causes and conditions that brought about these sensory experiences or mental experiences, accept it first on faith. And particularly when it comes to the mind, whatever happens in the mind, don't reject, don't follow, or ignore. Which means to say, if it's an unpleasant thought, an unpleasant emotion, a displeasure in your mind, resentment, jealousy, judgment, or so forth, don't reject it. But if it's something nice and pleasant, like a pleasant memory, nice pleasures, don't follow it. And thirdly, if it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, it's something very neutral, also don't ignore it. Right? So the first one is to accept. The second step is don't reject, follow, or ignore. Next one is to acknowledge it. Now, if you don't ignore it, what do? If you don't ignore it, then you acknowledge it. If it's an unpleasant thought, a resentment, a judgment, a comment, a nasty comment on somebody or on yourself, then acknowledge it. Don't follow it. Don't react to it. Don't follow it if something pleasant, and don't ignore it if it's something neither pleasant nor unpleasant, but acknowledge it, and then you come back to your five senses. You anchor the mind to the five senses. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. Now, this is particularly very useful because most people think of composure as an attainment that can only happen when you are seated, cross-legged, with your eyes closed, and watching your breath or watching your rising and falling or doing something like that. But when you're talking about anchoring the mind to the five senses, this can happen anytime, anywhere. As long as you are awake, the senses are operating, you can always bring your mind to be aware of the present moment of what's happening to the senses. Right now, for example, you are watching this video. While you are looking at the screen and while you're trying to understand what I say, you can also be aware of your body in the background. Sensations in your body, the sense of being seated. You can also see what's happening to your mind. But that's another step. We're talking about the body first, the five senses. So when you're able to do this, this is what I call open awareness, because you open up your awareness to the senses. And this will give you dynamic serenity, in the sense that because your mind has been trained to stay with the senses, with whatever you're doing, when you're walking, or you're washing the dishes, when you're sweeping the house, when you're cooking, you can be aware of what's happening in your senses. You're looking vegetables, your hand is holding the vegetable, one hand is holding the vegetable, the other hand is holding the knife, and you're cutting it. You can hear the sound of the chopping board. Now you can feel sensations in your hand, and you can see also, you can get a sense of smell, especially when you're cutting onions or chilies or something like that. Be aware of all these things. These are happening to the five senses. So when you are glued to the five senses in that way, to present activities of the five senses, then your mind will not have a chance to go and think of the past or worry about the future. Usually people like to ruminate, replay things that have just happened, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And of course, people like to plan for the future. Right? So by trying to tie your mind to be aware of the five senses, you cut down all these extraneous mental activities. But I'm not saying that you should completely stop thinking. That's impossible, because you are living in this world. You need to think, but think productive thoughts. Unproductive thoughts, idle thoughts, don't entertain them. Put them aside, come back to the present moment to be aware of what's happening to your senses.
Now, let's have a short break and listen to a beautiful Buddhist song composed and played by Wayfarers, a popular musical group.
Climb the path with gladness in the field of life, vanquishing illusion, ignorance and strife. Brotherhood and service shall our motto be, and the goal before us, truth and liberty. We will teach thy Dharma wheresoever we go. compassion in our actions show. We must stand together, fighting side by side. Truth is undivided, this must be our guide. All divisions vanish where the truth is known. This the greatest lesson by Lord Buddha showed. Forward marching ever in the Dharma's might, till we lead the nations into endless light.
Saturday, Section 3. Now it's time for Jataka Tales, which is a large collection of Buddhist morality stories whereby the Buddha recounts some of his past lives on his journey towards enlightenment.
ครหิตชาดกครั้งหนึ่งพระพุทธศาสดาเมื่อประทับอยู่ณพระเชตวันมหาวิหารศูนย์รวมจิตใจพุทธศาสนิกชนกลางมหานครสาวัตถีทรงปรารภพระภิกษุรูปหนึ่งเป็นภิกษุผู้ถูกเหล่าภิกษุสงฆ์ทั้งปวงกล่าวติเตียนเหตุเพราะท่านผู้นี้ถูกอำนาจกิเลสครอบงำให้อยากได้อยากมีและอยากเป็นเจ้าของทรัพย์สิ่งของต่างๆไม่จบสิ้นเครื่องบริขารต่างๆจึงถูกสะสมไว้เกินความพอเพียง
งามเหลือเกินถ้านับชิ้นนี้ด้วยเราก็สะสมได้10 ชิ้นแล้วสินะดีจังเลย
มิใช่แต่บริขารสมควรแก่สงฆ์เท่านั้นที่ภิกษุรูปนี้เก็บสะสมไว้เขายังเสาะหาสิ่งของมีราคาอื่นๆไว้ครองอีกเป็นจำนวนมากเช่นกันเพียงเพื่อความสุขที่ได้กล่าวว่านี่ของตนนั่นก็ของตนแค่นั้นเอง
ของชิ้นนี้ของเราช่างสวยเหลือเกินนั่นก็ของเรานี่ก็ของเราทั้งหมด สุขใจจริงๆ
สิ่งอันน่ารังเกียจและถูกติเตียนของภิกษุรูปนี้อีกประการคือการชอบแย่งชิงอวดอ้างเอาสิ่งของสาธารณะมาเป็นของตน
อ้าวท่านปล่อยผ้าชิ้นนั้นเลยอาตมาจองไว้ตั้งแต่เห็นเขาเอามาถวายสังฆทานแล้วอาตมาเห็นก่อนฉะนั้นก็ต้องเป็นของอาตมาเอามาเลยไม่ต้องจับ
อะไรกันแม้แต่ของที่ผู้ใจบุญเอามาถวายยังคิดจับจองเป็นเจ้าของได้อีกหรือเนี่ย
นานวันเข้าคำติเตียนเรื่องกิเลสอยากได้อยากครอบครองของภิกษุรูปนี้ก็เฉาไปทั้งพระวิหารซึ่งแน่นอนว่าต้องรบกวนสู่พระเนตรพระกันของพระพุทธเจ้าผู้ทรงคุณอันประเสริฐด้วย
ท่านเป็นภิกษุสงฆ์อยู่ในพระธรรมวินัยทำไมท่านไม่เคารพกฎของสงฆ์ยึดมั่นในพระธรรมวินัยเลยเล่าฉะไหนยังสนใจแต่เรื่องกิเลส
อิจฉาที่เรามีของเยอะกว่าละสิน่าเบื่อจริงๆเลย
องค์พระสัมมาสัมพุทธเจ้าทรงมีพระกรุณาที่คุณสงเคราะห์ภิกษุให้พ้นจากเงากิเลสแห่งโลภและหลงนั้นดูก่อนภิกษุธรรมดากิเลสนั้นแม้สัตว์เดรัจฉานทั้งหลายก็ติเตียนมาแล้วในการก่อนเธอมีโอกาสเกิดเป็นมนุษย์ซ้ำมีวาสนาได้บวชในพระศาสนาเช่นนี้ฉะไหนยังกระสันด้วยอำนาจกิเลสที่แม้สัตว์เดรัจฉานก็ติเตียนอีกเล่าครั้งนั้นพระองค์ได้ทรงตรัสเล่าครหิตชาดกอบรมภิกษุดังนี้หิมวันตรประเทศอันคลาคล่ำด้วยสรรพชีวิตและนักพรตชีไพรในอดีต ยังมีวานอนน้อยตัวหนึ่งกำเนิดขึ้นกลางฝูงวานอนจำนวนมากออกติดตามฝูงหาผลไม้กินจนเติบใหญ่อยู่ในหิมพานต์
เพื่อนเราหายไปไหนหมดเนี่ยเผลอแป๊บเดียวเอง
เคราะห์ร้ายวันหนึ่งวานอนตัวนี้ถูกพรานป่าจับได้จึงนำออกจากป่ามามัดไว้ในหมู่บ้านเพื่อถวายต่อพระเจ้าพรหมทัตกษัตริย์พาราณสี
ได้เวลาเดินทางแล้วลิงน้อยเอ๋ยเจ้าจะได้อาศัยพระราชนิเวศอยู่ให้สบายอย่าโวยวายไปเลย
เจ๊กปล่อยเราไปเดี๋ยวนี้เราไม่ไปอยู่ไหนทั้งนั้นแหละ
วานอนตัวนี้มีสติปัญญาติดตัวมาแต่ปางก่อนกุศลกรรมอันดีเช่นนี้เป็นรางวัลของผู้เคยทำบุญทานไว้ใครพบเห็นก็รักใคร่เมตตา
เจ้าลิงน้อยนี่ช่างน่ารักจริงๆดูท่าทางฉลาดกว่าลิงธรรมดาเลยนะเนี่ยขอบใจเจ้ามากที่นำมาให้เราทหารนำของรางวัลมามอบให้พรานคนนี้หน่อยมาอยู่กับเรานะเจ้าลิงน้อย
พระเจ้าพรหมทัตทรงบัญชาให้พรานดูแลวานอนนั้นในพระราชอุทยานยามทรงว่างราชกิจก็มักสำราญพระทัยกับความฉลาดของลิงตัวนี้อยู่เสมอ
อ้าวเลือกสิว่าผลสาลี่ที่เจ้าชอบน่ะมันอันไหน ฉลาดจริงๆรู้จักซะด้วย
จากเดือนผ่านไปเป็นปีวานอนจากหิมพานต์ก็ยิ่งฉลาดใกล้เคียงมนุษย์ขึ้นทุกที
เจ้าลิงน้อยตัวนี้รบเร้าที่จะนำผลไม้เนี่ยมาถวายพระองค์พะยะค่ะ
เจ้าลิงน้อยของข้าเจ้ารู้จักนำผลไม้มาถวายเราด้วยหรือนี่มาน่ารักจริงๆเลยเจ้านี่ฉลาดขึ้นทุกวัน
ด้วยความที่วานอนนั้นมักนำผลไม้มาถวายอยู่เสมอวันหนึ่งพระเจ้าอยู่หัวก็ทรงระลึกได้
ชลอยลิงน้อยคงสำนึกรักบ้านเกิดการนำมันมาใช้สอยในวังคงลำบากแก่มันไม่น้อยเอาละเราจะปล่อยเจ้าให้มีอิสระเจ้าคงอยากใช้ชีวิตกับญาติของเจ้ามากกว่าละสิ
พระเจ้าพรหมทัตทรงหลั่งอุทกให้ชีวิตเป็นทานปล่อยวานอนนั้นสู่ป่าหิมพานต์บ้านเกิดในเวลาต่อมา
ไปเถิดเจ้าลิงเอ๋ยเราจะปล่อยให้เจ้าเป็นอิสระนั่นคงทำให้เจ้ามีความสุขมากกว่าอยู่ที่นี่สินะนายพรานเจ้าจงเป็นธุระนำสัตว์ผู้ร่วมทุกตัวนี้กลับสู่มาตุภูมิของมันด้วยเถิด
ไม่นานต่อมานายพรานก็เดินทางเข้าถึงกลางป่าหิมพานต์ใกล้ถิ่นเดิมที่เคยจับตัวลิงน้อยได้จึงมอบอิสรภาพแก่กันตรงนั้น
ลาก่อนเจ้าลิงน้อยหวังว่าคงจำทางกลับบ้านของเจ้าถูกนะ
เวลานั้นหิมวันตประเทศเขตวานอนนิวาสก็คลึกครื้นด้วยความยินดีในการกลับมาของลิงในฝูงผู้จากไปนับปี
เร็วเจ้าลิงน้อยนั้นกลับมาแล้วนะไปต้อนรับกันเถอะพวกเราไป
จริงเหรอดีจังเลยไม่รู้เขาไปไหนมารีบไปกันเถอะข้าจะให้ลิงน้อยนั้นน่ะเล่าให้ฟังสักหน่อย
เหมือนอคันตุกะมาเยือนลิงผู้คืนสู่เหย้าจึงได้รับเกียรติให้นั่งที่โล่งแจ้งเป็นจุดเด่น
สวัสดีเราจากที่นี่ไปนานแต่ทุกอย่างยังเหมือนเดิมเลยนะเราคิดถึงพวกท่านมากเลยพวกท่านเป็นยังไงกันบ้างสบายดีกันใช่ไหม
วานอนผู้กลับสู่บ้านเกิดบอกเล่าชีวิตความเป็นอยู่ในพาราณสีจนหมดแต่กับความประพฤติของมนุษย์กลับไม่อยากพูดถึง
ทำไมเจ้าถึงไม่อยากเล่าเรื่องความประพฤติของมนุษย์ให้เราฟังล่ะ
นั่นน่ะสิเราอยากรู้จังว่ามนุษย์พวกนั้นน่ะเขาเป็นยังไงกันเล่ามาเถอะนะเล่ามาเถอะข้าน่ะอยากจะรู้
ลิงตัวอื่นๆรบเร้าอยู่นานวานอนน้อยนี้ก็ไม่ยอมปริปากเล่าเรื่องนี้แต่อย่างใดจนถึงกับมีลิงอาวุโสขึ้นมาขอร้องลิงตัวสำคัญของพระเจ้าพรหมทัตจึงจำใจบอกเล่าเรื่องมนุษย์ให้ฟังเล่ามาเถิดเจ้าลิงน้อยถือว่าเป็นการให้ความรู้แก่พวกเราชาวลิง
ความจริงเราไม่อยากพูดถึงผู้มีชีวิตพวกนี้เลยมันไม่ใช่เรื่องที่ดีนักแต่หากพวกท่านอยากรู้จริงๆเราจะเล่าให้ฟังทุกๆคนไม่ว่าวรรณกษัตริย์พราหมณ์หรือพ่อค้าแต่ละคนทั้งหลายนั้นต่างไม่เคยเพียงพอในสิ่งที่พวกเขามีอยู่ต่างพากันกล่าวแต่ว่าสิ่งนั้นของเราตั้งแต่พูดได้จนตายลงตั้งแต่เราไปอยู่ที่นั่นเราก็ได้ยินแต่คำนี้มาตลอดจนกระทั่งถึงวันที่เราถูกปล่อยตัวออกมาแม้แต่ตัวของเราเองก็กลายเป็นของสิ่งนั้นของเขาเหมือนกัน พวกเขากลุ่มหนึ่งซึ่งถือว่าไม่น้อยเลยที่ชอบสนุกสนานเอาประโยชน์กับการฆ่าฟันผู้อื่นทำลายผู้อื่นเพื่อความอยู่ต่อไปของตน
นั่นไงฝีมือข้าลูกธนูโดนลำตัวลานั้นเต็ม
โอ้ยของเจ้ายิงตั้งหลายดอกถึงจะถูกของข้านี่ดอกเดียวครั้งเดียวปักคอเลย
พวกมนุษย์มักช่อฉนเอาเปรียบกันในประโยชน์โชคลาภเป็นอาจินมนุษย์ลักขโมยกันตลอดเวลาโดยไม่เคยนั่งคิดทบทวนถูกผิด
เฮ้ยอันนี้ข้าจะยักยอกไว้เองเจ้ารีบเอาไปซ่อนไว้ด้านโน้นเร็วเข้าเดี๋ยวจะมีใครมาเห็นของดีเลยนะเนี่ย
การครองเรือนมีคู่ของชายหญิงก็มีไม่น้อยที่พวกเขาไม่ซื่อสัตย์ต่อกันหญิงหนึ่งอาจร่ำราสามีประหนึ่งอาวรณ์ห่วงใยแต่ในเวลาเดียวกันก็มีชายอื่นมาสำรองระเริงชู้กัน
พี่จ๊ะอย่าไปนานนักนะจ๊ะน้องกลัวจะอยู่คนเดียวไม่ได้ไปเลยไปหลายวันเลยก็ดีจะได้มีเวลาอยู่กับชู้รัก
ชายเป็นชู้กับสตรีของคนอื่นก็มีสตรีอีกคนเป็นเจ้าของอยู่แล้วเช่นกัน
น้องจ๋าพี่ต้องไปต่างจังหวัดสัก 2-3 วันน่ะเจ้าอยู่คนเดียวระวังตัวด้วยนะจ๊ะพี่น่ะเป็นห่วงเหลือเกิน มีเวลาตั้ง 2-3 วันแอบไปหาชู้รักเราดีกว่าม
นุษย์มีการเป็นอาภรณ์แม้สวดมนต์ภาวนาสักเท่าใดก็ไม่อาจเข้าถึงพระธรรมบริสุทธิ์ได้จริงอีกผู้คนอันห่างธรรมะแทบทั้งแผ่นดินก็ยังประพฤติผิดทางวาจาน
ายข้าเป็นคนดีมากเลยเจ้าไว้ใจเถอะลงคะแนนให้นายข้าแล้วเจ้าจะมีความเป็นอยู่ที่ดีกว่านี้แน่เอานี่เงินเล็กน้อยเอาเก็บไว้ใช้ถ้านายข้าได้รับเลือกเจ้าจะได้มากกว่านี้
อีกทั้งยังมีคนบาปผู้อ่อนแอที่ใช้น้ำเมาเป็นที่พึ่งแก่ตนพวกเขาดื่มเพื่อให้ลืมเกรงกลัวเจ้านายลืมเกลียดกลัวภรรยาชั่วขณะพวกเขาทำลายบุคลิกและสุขภาพตนเองด้วยน้ำเมากันเป็นนิด
ดื่มเข้าไปเถอะเหล้าเนี่ยดื่มแล้วมีอะไรดีขึ้นมาบ้างไหมงานก็โดนไล่ออกหนี้สินอีกก็ล้นพ้นตัวไม่รู้จักหางานทำฉันละเซ็งจริงๆกับแกเนี่ยฮะ
โอ้ยโถเมียจ๋าอย่าโกรธไปเลยนะจ๊ะเดี๋ยวแก่เร็วอย่างน้อยเหล้าเนี่ยก็ทำให้พี่มองน้องสวยขึ้นนะจ๊ะ
ที่สำคัญมนุษย์ยังแบ่งแยกหมู่เหล่ากันโดยยกตนและพวกตนว่าถูกต้องว่าดีกว่าอีกฝ่ายหนึ่ง
นายข้าถูกนายเจ้าละผิด
นายของเจ้านั่นแหละที่โกงกินนายของข้าดีกว่า
ชาติพันธุ์ของมนุษย์เคยสูญสลายไปแบบล้างเผ่ากันมาแล้วหลายกับหลายกันเพราะการถือกิเลสตัณหาของเรานี่แหละเพื่อนลิงทั้งหลายด้วยเหตุนี้ยังไงล่ะเราถึงไม่อยากกล่าวถึงมนุษย์นัก
วานอนทั้งฝูงเมื่อได้รู้ถึงพฤติกรรมมนุษย์เช่นนั้นก็พากันติเตียนบางก็ชำระล้างหูของตนแล้วร่วมใจกันย้ายถิ่นฐานให้ไกลจากมนุษย์เข้าไปในป่าลึกสุดๆของหิมพานต์
จุยจี้ฮักถ้าเรารู้ว่าพฤติกรรมของมนุษย์เลวร้ายเช่นนี้นะเราไม่ขอให้เจ้าเล่าให้ฟังดีกว่าจุยฟังแล้วขนลุกเลยเจี๊ยบ
น่าเกลียดน่ากลัวจริงๆเลยชาติเนี้ยขอเลยนะอย่าให้พบให้เจอกันเลย
พระพุทธศาสดาแสดงพระธรรมเทศนาครหิตชาดกนี้จบแล้วทรงประกาศสัจธรรมเป็นอริยสัจภิกษุผู้มีกรรมแต่ปางบั่นก็ตั้งจิตมั่นในโสดาปัตติผลคือเข้าใจพระธรรมบรรลุโสดาบันในพุทธกาลต่อมาฝูงวานอนแห่งหิมพานต์กำเนิดเป็นพุทธบริษัทวานอนผู้เลิศปัญญาเสวยพระชาติเป็นพระพุทธเจ้า
That concludes today's program. If you have any questions about the contents of our broadcast, please feel free to reach out to us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. Our dedicated team remains committed to sharing the profound teachings of the Buddha, helping you walk the path of wisdom and enlightenment. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the same time.